Incidents of anti-Asian racism rose dramatically during the pandemic, fueled by rhetoric that COVID-19 was somehow a Chinese disease. Sadly, anti-Asian sentiment is hardly a new phenomenon in Canada, particularly on the West Coast. If anything, COVID reignited ugly feelings that had always been bubbling below the surface. And the author of a new book reminds us that those racist incidents are certainly not without precedent. Here to talk about White Riot, the 1907 anti-Asian riots in Vancouver, is artist and author Henry Jung. COVID certainly showing that the feelings that fueled the anti-Asian riots more than a century ago have not really gone away. How important is it then to share this history and to make it known to future generations?
Well, it's so important to understand the conditions in which we currently live and how they are so tied into what's happened in the past. So the anti-Asian sentiment on the West Coast goes back, over 150 years, back to the earlier days of settlers coming into this area on the West Coast. That actually goes back, to the mid 19th century, and the earliest Asians who came over here to pan for gold, to mine for gold, was during the gold rush. And that actually started down in Mexico, worked its way up California, the West Coast, and so forth, through British Columbia up to Yukon. And during those times, there was a lot of racial tension. There were a lot of massacres of Chinese miners, the largest one in the States being in San Francisco. I think something like 300 miners were killed. And so the anti-Asian riot in 1907 was only one amongst many, many events. The first anti-Chinese riot in Vancouver was just a few months after the city was founded in 1887. It's not an uncommon event, unfortunately.
Now, let's talk about those riots themselves. For 2 days in 1907, the businesses of Chinese Canadians and Japanese Canadians were destroyed, members of those communities harassed, fueled by essentially state-sponsored racism and hysteria in the form of the Asiatic Exclusion League. What sparked all that?
Well, Vancouver wanted a piece of the action of the Asiatic Exclusion League, which had been founded in San Francisco a couple of years prior. So they wanted their local chapter. It was the Vancouver Trades and Labor Council, which was a labor organization that wanted its own kind of franchise of that. And they organized the first ever meeting. The mayor of Vancouver and city councilors actually attended and were co-signers of the founding of the Asiatic Exclusion League. They organized their first event the weekend after Labor Day. Back then, Labor Day was a week earlier than we have it now, for a parade and demonstration to lobby the government to prohibit more Asians from coming into the country. And so there was a big parade. There's a cavalcade with the mayor of Vancouver and his wife in a car. There were two marching bands. It was led by the major from the military drill hall, and estimates up to a third of Vancouver's population came out. Christian leaders, labor leaders, all white people, of course, attended, and there were inflammatory speeches being made with special guests from the US and New Zealand, all anti-Asian activists, and they roiled up the crowd. A mob broke out, and some of these angry people went down to attack the Chinese because it was right next to City Hall at the time. And then it took a little while for the Chinese to organize and start fighting back, gather their weapons, set up patrols. It raged on for 2 days. On the second day, the rioters went to the Japanese Canadian area, which was Powell Street area, and they were more prepared because they had time. So they already set up barricades and had all their weapons ready and so forth. So yeah, there was hand-to-hand combat that happened for 2 days. And after it finished, the Chinese went on strike for 3 days and effectively shut down the city. The Japanese went to work on Monday morning, and in the afternoon they left work and gathered in Oppenheimer Park, back then it was known as Beatty Street grounds, to discuss what they were going to demand from the city and the government for an apology and reparations. And ironically, the city's mayor, Alexander Bethune, the mayor of Vancouver, had to come out and talk to the Japanese Canadians. It was ironic because he was one of the co-founders of the Asiatic Exclusion League here in Vancouver. So eventually there were reparations.
White Riot is based on your 360 Riot Walk, a multimedia walking tour showing the different stops of the demonstration, parade, mob attack. This all started pre-COVID, but of course it's become all the more timely since then.
Yes, 360 Riot Walk was launched in 2019, and it's a self-guided walking tour anyone can take as long as you have a mobile device and internet access at 360riotwalk.ca. So there's 13 stops along the way, and it retraces the steps of the riot going in, starting from Gastown, but going into Chinatown and the Powell Street area. The book is based on that project. The script is in the book, as well as 7 contextualizing articles by contributing writers, expanding on this topic and providing a contemporary context as well.
The name of the book is White Riot, the 1907 Anti-Asian Riots in Vancouver. It's available from Arsenal Pulp Press.